Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Hockey fans, are you ready to brave the wild? With me, your host, Paladino Joey. Brave the Wild is available on the sportstuff.com, iTunes, Stitcher, and Double Twist, which is an Android device, or Android application, pardon me. Stitcher is for everything, iTunes for Apple. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you. And, well, here we go. Minnesota Wild, well, they've been playing better. Still not winning too many games. They finally won one. They finally won 2 in a row here, though. One unexpected. You get the idea. They went 500, which I did predict. Just a little flip flop mixed in there, and some pretty dramatic hockey along the way. Actually, to be honest, they played pretty well in these past 4 games. But ultimately, it's going to be kind of a similar show to last week. Again, it's almost like State of the Wild Part X. I mean, it could be a million of them. I mean, this might be the 3rd or 4th one now already. You could say, without overdoing it, per se. You got a couple trades to talk about. I'm going to get into the Mike Yeo Q&A a bit that took place last week. You know, it happened that day I published the show. Isn't that frustrating? It happened in the afternoon. I should have waited another day. It would have been a lot fresher, but I'll comment a bit on it. I would have commented more if it was more fresh at the time. But I guess I'll open up with that a bit, and then I'll be very brief about the games, per se. Kind of this and that, you get the idea. So let's get going, and I'll talk about the trades after this. Ultimately, Mike Yeo was asked about has he watched any games. He's like, no, I tuned in a little bit, but not much. He was really more interested just to see what the systems look like, tuned in a little bit, stuff like that. You want to look into, did he have a feeling the dismissal was coming? He was saying mostly that he knew it was a possibility. You think you're prepared for it, but I would say that I wasn't. So basically, it hit Mike Yeo a lot harder than he thought. That's kind of like the gist of that. Ultimately, the Adam Oates thing, though, that's kind of the main theme here of the whole drama that's taken place with the Wild the past couple of years. Ultimately, the Adam Oates is kind of like the crest of it. This is kind of like when you knew Mike Yeo was pretty much dead meat, was when the players were kind of sneaking behind his back, bringing in Adam Oates. Ultimately, in the offseason, you'd think it isn't too bad, ultimately, but when it's coaching schemes, yeah, that's not good. That's not a good sign. You'd think we're just working with a guy, like, say, Timberwolves' Andrew Wiggins working with Kobe Bryant, or Kobe Bryant years ago working with Hakeem Olajuwon. That's different than maybe working with, like, Phil Jackson or something on the triangle when your offense is like a pick and roll, in the NBA, stuff like that. You get the idea. Or in hockey, like just the power play in this case. He's working with a completely different scheme with a former coach and obviously a Hall of Fame player in Adam Oates that Lou Nanne apparently tried to get years ago, but ultimately the owner was like, no, that's okay. It's kind of funny because of the amount of money it would cost and such. That's kind of like a semi-North Stars memory, you could say. I'd like to bring that bit back. That would be nice. Love when Lou Nanne talks. He would be an unbelievable guest on this show. He'd be like the ultimate guest, wouldn't he? These are, of course, from Michael Russo in the Star Tribune overall, and others, but it's mostly Michael Russo. He was saying Adam Oates was hired before the season by several players as a personal coach. 2 of the players were Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. When you say things never felt right, because that's the other thing. It's just, Mike Yeo was saying, things just never felt right, even when we were playing some of our best hockey early in the year. He said, did this start with the Adam Oates stuff? And then Mike Yeo quickly says, yeah. Wow, can you imagine that? It started with the Adam Oates thing, and it makes sense. He says, yeah, I thought we dealt with it. We talked with Zach, we had no issues with it after that. I talked with some players, whether it's something like that, whether it's the trade rumors, whatever it is, when there's things that might cause a little unrest, they kind of sit there and they hang out. When things are going well, they're forgotten and pushed aside. But when things don't go well, they quite often come back. Just like when you're just like a married couple, maybe you have issues, just like anything. Working relationships, maybe things are going all right. And now things are starting to struggle again. And you're like, you're still the same asshole that did this and did that and that, you know what I mean? And you still are the same lazy bum that didn't do this and never does this. I'm sick and tired, stuff like that tends to come up. And it happens in everyday life. It sucks. It sucks. It's reality. But then you get the real interesting one that, we all knew about the Adam Oates situation coming in the offseason and all that, and it kind of annoyed Mr. Mike Yeo and such. And he was saying ultimately about did he defer to the veterans? He basically feels that, most of us feel he did. And then Mike Yeo saying, no, I didn't, and blah, blah, blah. I didn't defer to them, and it's all about certain players, but we didn't have he mentioned several times we didn't have a player that could score 100 points in a season, so it's like you have to work together, that type of thing, and it had to be more equal and such. Though I think a lot of us in the viewing audience would say that Mike Yeo did defer to the veterans more. You didn't see scratches to Pominville or Vanek or anything. You didn't see demotion to Pominville until the last week of Mike Yeo's run with the Wild. You saw young guys get demoted every day, all the time. You saw guys get demoted all the time to the fourth line, third line, scratched. You saw it constantly. Third defensive pairing, whatever it was. Of course, defense has kind of been pretty much a trend. It's pretty much been an ongoing trend forever for the Wild. The certain players have been kind of where they've kind of been where they've been. They've been mainstays and such. Ultimately, Mike Yeo was saying about, Russo was asking him, do you think the younger guys eventually resented the older guys because the older players were never benched, scratched, or put on the fourth line? Yep, here we go. And Yeo says, I think there was ... a disconnect. But this has gone on for a little while between the older guys and the younger guys, and I don't think it's one-sided. I think every team in the league has some issues, and I think we dealt with the things fairly well for the most part, but obviously they became bigger once we started to lose. And it's probably been going on forever because of, the mid-season swoons every single season. Russo asking him to be more specific about can he be more specific? And then Yeo said, no, I just felt almost two groups. There were younger guys and the older guys. It just wasn't a group. Yeah, a lot of fragile players on this team. Kind of sounds like the Timberwolves in the early 2000s ultimately, and they did not fire Philip Saunders. God rest his soul now, obviously. But I'm just saying, at the time, the Wolves probably should have made a move earlier at the time, but yeah, you get the idea. That's not disrespecting anybody. It has nothing to do with what took place with Saunders like 12 years later, and he ended up being one of the best the best president of basketball operations in Timberwolves history. And here we go. Russo addressing the fact that Oates came to the morning skate January 12th. Can you imagine that? And this was a huge point of impact. This was the point of impact, I would say, for this train wreck. You had issues. You had problems taking place. You had maybe the engine had some issues on this train. Maybe some of the wheels were starting to get loose. Like something just wasn't right, There was a squeak. There was squeaks here, squeaks there. There's a rattle. Wonder what that's all about. That's kind of weird. And then January 12th, the fateful January 12th, when the Minnesota Wild hosted the Buffalo Sabres, the game that always saved Mike Yeo's job. Okay, we've been struggling. Things have not been going well, but here's the Buffalo Sabres. Bam, 6-0. Hell yeah. Now we're going to get moving. He got Devin Dubnyk in here, 6-0 game. Devin Dubnyk only had to stop like 13 shots because the Wild just dominated the puck the whole game. But then the Wild were down 3-0 right out of the gate in that case. You think that's a point of impact? Do you think so? Do you think there's something went amiss at that stage? 3-0 the Buffalo Sabres in the Xcel Energy Center. Do you think something's wrong? Pardon me for the rattling here. It's the train crashing, right? That's what that was. Yeah, not good. Mike Yeo simply says I'm not going to even comment on it, but I would say I would not do the same thing. You think? Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Mike Yeo continuing. I'm going to kind of go get general about it now. kind of talking about how the trade rumors kind of helped damage the psyche of the team and such. Really? The whole Ryan Johansson thing, the Wild tried to get him away from Columbus, was it? Yes, Columbus. They tried to get him away from Columbus. He ended up going to Nashville. Terrific. That's one of the teams we're trying to catch, and they're in an unbelievable run right now. And we tried to get Mr. Jonathan Drouin as well from Tampa Bay, which, again, neither one of these took place. Obviously, Johansson, I always think it's Johansson, but it's all over the place. Johansson ended up going to Nashville, of course, like we said, and Drouin is still there. Tampa Bay not willing to come down on the demands, and the Wild unwilling and unable, I would say, to make a trade in that situation because we don't have that many draft picks right now. We'll talk about that in very shortly here. And, of course, a lot of the young guys would probably get ripped off at this stage. You trade away Mikael Granlund. I can't believe I did that. Mikael Granlund, what are you going to get for him? What are you going to get for Mikael Granlund? Even though he's been playing better, and to be quite fair, everybody's been playing better. But, yeah, you get the idea. Maybe the divide is gone for the time being. But Yo was saying how that continued to draw more of a divide because it's like we need some type of change. Is it a certain player, another player? And last year it was a goalie. But this time it ended up having to be the coach because somebody had to go. And well, you know what? I think from what you read here, from what you hear, regardless if Mike Yeo is this horrible coach, or if the players were ultra fragile, it's a combined thing here. And unfortunately, Mike Yeo had to go in that situation because you can't fire all the players. The old cliche, you can't fire all the players. So ultimately, the coach had to go, and there was just no doubt about it. Just zero doubt about it. Zach Parise, I'll get to this one real quick too because what the hell's up with that guy? You know, Mr. Grit, Mr. Toughness, Mr. Put the puck on net, Mr. Leader, Mr. I'll score goals regardless if I have a broken foot, a tear on my big cut on my face, whatever it is. I'll keep scoring goals. I'll keep putting the puck on net. I'll keep going to the net. But then there's this type of huge divide with Mike Yeo, pretty crazy. Michael Russo was asking him, did Parise's frustrated attitude disappoint you? And basically saying we had a couple of really good conversations, this and that, and the competitiveness between each other maybe got a little bit, intense at times, but there was never a huge issue. All that good stuff. Mike Yeo wasn't sure how to look at the annual mid-season slump, this and that. So we better probably continue with this. A lot of people believe Mike Yeo will be a head coach again, and Mike is just waiting to be a coach again. He wants to coach right now. He can't wait for somebody to hire him as soon as possible. He really loves it so much, and it just struck him really hard when he got let go. So there it is. I feel bad for him, but it's one of those things. There had to be a change. And ultimately it'll be for the better for both parties. Mike Yeo will hopefully get to a different organization. He'll be better. He'll learn from his mistakes, just like we all have to at every job we do. You learn from mistakes or learn from weaknesses. Maybe you don't have to make a mistake, but weaknesses, stuff like that. Strengths and weaknesses. You build on your strengths and you fix your weaknesses as much as possible. That type of deal. There you go. Mike Yeo is on his way somewhere at some point, probably. He's only 42. He's got a nice career ahead of him. So let's look at some of the trades. Well, there are a couple. Most of the minor league here. So ultimately, the Wild acquire Connor Allen from Ottawa and Scott Sabourin from Los Angeles. Oh, yeah. The Wild ended up trading away Michael Keranen to the Ottawa Senators for Connor Allen, the defenseman, ultimately. And Brett Sutter, a guy who the Wild seemed to, or not the Wild, but Mike Yeo never seemed to like. I liked him. He was productive when he was on the Wild for a short stretch, but Mike Yeo never liked him. He was actually brought here to be a potential fourth or third liner on the Wild and was sent down to Iowa. This was last season. And you never really saw him again. He just kind of sat down there forever. Sutter was a fairly productive player for Calgary in years past. He's nothing special, but he was decent, and Mike Yeo just said, screw you, basically. So that's kind of sad. I feel kind of bad about that one. The production level of everybody in this case, not the prettiest thing you ever saw. Brett Sutter only had 14 points in Iowa this year in 57 games. That's not much. Keranen was one of the semi-better scorers. He's 26. Sutter, 28. 23 points in 45 games with Iowa. He was one of the upper echelon guys down there, but he's not at the level of Zach Mitchell and stuff. Ooh. And of course, Mr. Jordan Schrader, who I feel bad for as well. I think he should be an NHL fourth liner. Lots of speed and such, but whatever, it happens, I guess. Ultimately, Connor Allen from the system of the, these are both minor league trades officially. The system of the Ottawa Senators has 11 points in 48 games. That's not the worst ever for a defenseman, but it's nothing super special. He's actually from the United States, of Chicago, Illinois, 76 points overall in 193 AHL games, and he's played a couple games at the Rangers, and ultimately, he had 7 games at the Rangers and started ultimately with Tampa Bay in years past. So there you go, in 2013. Sabourin, I keep thinking it's Sauerbrunn, but it's Sabourin has 5 points, just 5 points in 28 games. So he hasn't played too much this year, kind of in and out of injuries and such. Unfortunately for him, only 5 points in 28 games, not the most productive thing. He's from Orleans, not New Orleans, but Orleans, Ontario. 43 points in 153 AHL contests with Ontario and Manchester. Manchester, huh? Interesting. Well, there you go. All right, so minor league trade. Maybe I got a little bit too much into that, didn't I? But, oh well, at least you get an idea who we're getting, I suppose. Brodin has been activated, but still unavailable. Folin and Brodin, I gotta like that. Folin back down to the Iowa Wild, where he's one of the better players down there, and of course the 6th or 7th defenseman on the Wild, ultimately between him and Mr. Prosser, Nate Prosser, kind of trading that spot back and forth. But now Brodin back up with the Wild. Of course, did not play last night, so raising a couple questions. Well, here we go. This is the big one, the big blockbuster, but it's kind of important per se. Ultimately, the Wild have acquired David Jones from the Calgary Flames and Nicholas Backstrom. That's right, the same Nicholas Backstrom that was goaltender for the Wild since 2006, came in as a free agent signing, most likely at the time thought of going to the Houston Aeros, which are now the Iowa Wild, of course, the Houston Aeros franchise down there, and then see what happens. You know, he's got a chance to make the NHL roster. You never know, but see what happens. He ends up making the roster as a backup behind Manuel Fernandez, ultimately, and Manny Fernandez was his inconsistent self, but like a worse version of it. And then Nicholas Backstrom, this guy's pretty good. He's better than, wow, he's really good. Damn. And then he started putting up great numbers, phenomenal goalie for a couple years there. And then he had injuries and kind of in and out, and he kept signing. We signed him for a big contract after a couple of good years there. After his first little contract was done, he signed a pretty big one, and then of course the injuries came in, all that good stuff, and then we signed him one more time as a backup for a 3-year deal because we were too desperate. Ultimately, we Josh Harding with his issues with MS and all that, multiple sclerosis, and then of course, unable to sign anybody else, unable to get Bernier from Toronto or from LA. He ended up going to Toronto. And you get the idea there. Nicholas Backstrom, this kind of harkens back to way back before the Wild started, when the Wild had Mike Vernon. Doug Reiserl picked up Mike Vernon in the expansion draft and then traded him back to Calgary. He was 38 years old, so it kind of reminds me of this in a way. As funny as that sounds. And plus the fact David Jones there was the guy we got from Calgary, wearing a classic Flames jersey, because they wear the retro ones sometimes, the ones from the 80s and early 90s. Gotta love those. So classic. The ones without the black mixed in. Beautiful jerseys. Love them. That's when they were champions. And Stanley Cup finalists and conference finalists, all that stuff. Great team in the 80s were the Calgary Flames. Mike Vernon was a huge part of that team for a long time. It was kind of funny how the Wild had him for a couple of days and then ultimately traded him to the Calgary Flames at age 38 to have one final season there. Nicholas Backstrom, 38 to the Calgary Flames. So there you go. David Jones ultimately was 31 years old, much more productive earlier in his career. 27-goal season with the Colorado Avalanche, 20-goal season with the Avalanche. Some pretty productive numbers. Kind of a second-line guy, then relegated after some ankle injuries and stuff that have really slowed him down. Relegated now to more of fourth line, some third line, but mostly fourth line, and more of a 15, 20-point type of guy at this stage of his career. Right now he has 15 points, 9 goals, and only 6 assists in 59 games with the Flames, but a pretty productive player in his past. He was a 9th-round pick in the draft, which is crazy. That doesn't even exist anymore, back in 2003. Had a pretty productive season all years ago, 45 points with the Avalanche, not even that long ago, in 2010, 2011, and even as soon as 2012, pretty productive guy, but injuries just kind of took over, unfortunately, and slowed him down, and that sucks. That's a big shame, ultimately. So I'll try to briefly go over the games here. I apologize, kind of long here, so it's just what it is, kind of state of the wild. I got to quit snapping my lips there. Ultimately, the Philadelphia game, they were snake bit Thursday, February the 25th. Snake bit by multiple good scoring chances not going in, ultimately. And ultimately the final attempt of the game is what buried the Wild, and it totally sucked. I don't know how he didn't get one of the stars of the game. And I was afraid that Michael Neuwirth would be if Michael Neuwirth was the goalie, that the Wild would be in trouble, because Jones, a much more beatable goalie. I figured if he's in net, and he'd been kind of the main starter for Philly, if he was in net, the Wild would probably win the game. But this Neuwirth guy might help them sneak into the postseason as they continue to get better. They ultimately beat the Wild 3-2. The Wild get no points out of it. And, of course, the final play of the game, a lot of you would think should have been a goal. Ultimately, it was called no goal. The puck basically was underneath the guy's glove as it slid, and there's no way to see under the guy's glove. It's just, oh well, it didn't. There was no visual evidence that the puck crossed the line, so ultimately it was called no goal. It was a heartbreaker. It was at the final seconds, would have tied the game, would not have given the Wild a victory, but it would have minimum given them a point. Of course, the Wild's overtime record this year has been absolutely putrid, but maybe there would have been a chance to end that whole run. That would have been terrific. So then you got to play a back-to-back. You go from Philly to Washington, D.C., where, on Friday, February the 26th, where the Wild, they came off firing. They looked really good. They looked really good the whole game, and it just slipped away. And Holtby was good in net like he always is. Heartbreaker. Ultimately, even though the Wild started things out very nicely in the game. I should talk about who scored the goals really quick and thought off here, just to mention it really quick here. Ultimately, the goal scorers in the Philly game for the Wild were Thomas Vanek, Thomas Vanek and Mikhail Granlund. Vanek assisting on a Granlund goal. He ultimately had 2 points in the game. Very cool for his sake. Ultimately, Mike Riley netting his 4th assist on the Vanek goal early on. Another power play goal for Thomas Vanek, who's been playing significantly better, and Granlund's been a completely different player under the torch. It's been very cool, ultimately. And you'll hear about another guy who's been unbelievable under the torch, and he's the guy that's going to get the award for the week, but we'll get to that later. Washington, D.C., things started out poorly in the Philly game, so it's kind of like a reciprocal in this case, where things started out well in the Washington game, but ultimately the Wild were unable to hold on. Koivu scoring early on at the end of the first period on a pretty nice pass from Jason Pominville, I got to admit. Pominville just continuing to rack up the points. He's been getting tons of assists, and he's actually been scoring goals as well. You got to love what you're seeing out of Jason Pominville of just incredible. Koivu, though, getting close to the net there, getting his 13th goal of the year. Niederreiter, again, another guy who's been scoring points, who's been scoring goals and been getting assists, but mostly scoring goals. 12th goal of the year for him, 13th goal of the year for Mikko Koivu. But ultimately, Ovechkin and Orlov just took over the game with goals in the third period. 40th goal of the year for Alex Ovechkin. Once that went in, you kind of had a bad feeling the Wild weren't going to win this one, and ultimately it wasn't meant to be. Holtby was outstanding like he was last week. Heartbreaker, disappointing, and the Wild lose the game, or was it 2 weeks ago? 3-2 in Washington, D.C. There you go. Just a disappointment there. And then things get surprisingly better. The Wild did not look good against Florida earlier this year. They hadn't been playing well against them for a while the last couple of years. Florida just continued to kick the Wild's butt. And this is a really good Florida team that came into Xcel Energy Center, and the Wild win 3-1. Crazy, huh? Not bad. I'll take it. 3-1 victory for the Wild in this game. Erik Haula, another guy. This has just been outstanding in the game. Scoring an unassisted goal, 8th of the season. Forcing a turnover and attacking and scoring his 8th goal of the year. Coyle with his 19th goal of the year early on in that first period, putting the Wild up 1-0. I'm thinking, wow, we got a chance at this thing. And then Florida ties it up with Aaron Ekblad, 12th goal of the year on the power play. the Wild penalty kill has not been so hot for a while now. It's really, the whole special teams of the Wild has been disappointing, but I got to say the power play's been better, I guess. At least we're scoring goals. But yeah, Coyle getting the 19th goal of the year. It's a career high, just continues to become more and more of a career high. Ultimately, on a nice feed from Parise, Coyle just finishing it as the Wild attacking the net in that situation. And then Pominville on the power play. Empty netter, just finishing it off. And hey, you know what? It's an empty netter, but I'm sure Pominville will take it. Eric Halla racking another point. He has been unbelievable, ultimately. 10 points in 9 games for Eric Halla of late. Just an incredible player. He's definitely going to at least be an honorable mention for the Mike McDonald Award. Pominville, 10th goal of the season on the power play. Hey, at least you're able to get it, though. At least you're able to get another goal out of it. But it doesn't take away from what Pominville's been doing. You know, how it's, even though it's an empty netter is what I'm trying to say, does not take away with just how well Pominville has been playing. An outstanding, happy night for the Wild. Great goaltending as well throughout the course of the night. Florida just could not get anything going, much to their chagrin. Ultimately, boy, oh boy, was Devin Dubnyk was sharp. Roberto Luongo, he got hit in the game, unfortunately, and El Montoya had to finish things off as well. Dubnyk only faced 18 shots in the game, but he stopped 17 and was very strong throughout the way there. The Wild open up the month of March on Super Tuesday. Where we beat the Colorado Avalanche 6-3 in a pretty dramatic game. Pretty exciting. Didn't look good early on, did it? No, it really didn't. The Wild getting a penalty right out of the gate, like just seconds into the game. Nino Niederreiter called for tripping. And then, just like clockwork, the Avalanche score right away. Jerome McGinley, of all people, just a couple seconds, about 10 seconds later, Jerome McGinley, 19th goal of the year, and again, the leading goal scorer in the history of Wild opponents. Michael Bodecker just rubbing it in deeper as Colorado was able to acquire him. Mikhail Bodecker, Budker, ultimately getting his 27th assist of the year. Again, rubbing it in our face, ultimately, as the Wild unable to acquire a player of that magnitude at this stage. He's only 26 and has quite a career ahead of him. So it's like, here we go. The Wild trail Colorado by only 2 points, but we're just going to get nothing out of it. We're just going to be heartbroken. We're going to lose again and all that good stuff. We're going to get pushed down right when we're starting to catch up. But no, Nino Niederreiter and Jason Pominville score goals about a minute apart. Pominville and Niederreiter assisting on each other's goals during the course of this one. Just fantastic. Both nice shots, both wristers, I would call them. Wristers, like almost like a one-timer, but more of a wrister type of actually, yeah, they were wristers. Pominville was it was laser sharp shot. Just perfect shot, aggressive, just fire, rocket fire, basically. I could just imagine Torch telling Pominville, of course, Coach John Tortorelli. I'm getting all over the place because of the other Torts. Tortorella, the other coach. Tortorelli ultimately telling Pominville to simply rock and fire. He's been a completely different player. So they both trade a goal with each other. Niederreiter, Pominville playing phenomenal hockey the past couple of days. Eric Halla, this was like a fast break almost in a way. Just a beautiful, on-the-money pass. Scandella just getting the puck to Dumba with a very far forward pass to Eric Halla, who exploded to the net. Beautiful. Just so much speed and made a really, 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 really nice move on the ever-frustrated Varlamov. Could not handle it. He could not stop it. Third goal for the Wild there, and that was the end of Varlamov after that one. Oh, I could just see the frustration on Patrick Waugh's face after this. 9th goal of the year for Eric Halla. 9 goals for Eric Halla. Unbelievable. And again, 10 points in 9 games for Eric Halla. Wow. He's been outstanding for the Wild here. Pardon my, I'm just having fun with the accent there. He really has been outstanding. Second period had us Wild fans pretty concerned when the Colorado Avalanche score early and often in the second period. Chris Bygras and Cody McLeod each scoring. Bygras' first goal of the season, and McLeod with his 8th goal of the season, tying things up for the Colorado Avalanche. And then the third period, Coyle netting a couple goals. Ultimately, his second one was an empty netter, as Patrick Waugh is known to do. He gets the empty net going pretty early and ended up making the game look more lopsided than it was. Coyle with an unbelievably huge goal early in that third period from Zach Parise. 20th goal of the season. I mean, we're talking about Charlie Coyle with now 21 goals ultimately because you add the empty netter. 21 goals on the season. This guy is going to be a 30-goal scorer this year. I mean, I would be absolutely shocked if Charlie Coyle doesn't finish with 30 goals on the season. You got 2 months to play, or maybe a month and a half, or a month and 3 weeks, whatever it is, to play. About 6 weeks or so remaining. You think he's not going to get 9 goals in 6 weeks with the way he's been going? I mean, Charlie Coyle is becoming an outstanding player for this team, and he's the leading goal scorer for the Minnesota Wild. What did I say early in the season, or actually in the preseason? Who did I say of all the young guys is the most likely to emerge as the best player out of the group? Charlie Coyle. Well, I finally got something right, didn't I? Guys like Charlie Coyle and Erik Haula may end up keeping Chuck Fletcher's job here. They may ultimately end up doing that. Oh, man. Jason Pominville assisting a third point of the game. Anita Niederreiter's empty netter. Yeah, it's an empty netter, but it's another assist for Pominville, and it just looks so classic, so cool to see Pominville playing so well. And he's been getting so many assists of late, and he's now at 11 goals versus 4 goals when Mike Yeo was fired. He was at 4 goals at that stage. Just think about that. Isn't that crazy? Think about it. It just boggles the mind. Can't believe it. Wow. I can't believe it. Or was it 6? Pardon me. But still, either way, I mean, he pretty much has already doubled it in a very short time here. Pominville may wind up with 18 goals after all, like he had last year. It was nothing special, but it was a nice recovery after a slow start for him again last year. Remember, very familiar. So Pominville starting to be a little bit worth his contract again, which is nice to see, ultimately. Let's pass out the awards so this show doesn't drag on too long here. Mike Modano Award is going to go to Jason Pominville with honorable mentions, very strong honorable mentions going to, well, you could almost say 3 people, but Erik Haula, absolutely. Over a 2-week stretch, Erik Haula gets the Mike Modano Award. The overall 2 weeks, he's the Mike Modano, but you could have him and Charlie Coyle as honorable mentions. I'd even throw in Niederreiter. I mean, all 3 of those guys have been playing great. All 3 of those young guys have been playing great, but the veteran in this case, this week, will get the Mike Modano Award. What a nice overall run for Pominville this week, really racking up the points. He's now one of the leading scorers in the team again, which is kind of funny. Didn't think we'd ever see that again the way he was going. I mean, he was so far down there, it wasn't even funny. James Shepard Memorial. Can I do it again? Because you know, might as well give it to Ryan Suter, ultimately. I was going to give it to Parise. You could almost give it to both of them. You know, I'm going to give it to both of them they haven't been as much of a factor of late, and just for all the BS that they pulled here, and I hadn't been able to really go at it since the Q&A came out. For all the BS they did, they helped sabotage this season without really meaning to, but ultimately it did. They certainly broke a couple eggs to make an omelet, didn't they? I mean, they broke a lot of eggs here. They tried to break a couple eggs, they ended up dropping the whole box almost here. I mean, we're talking, they dropped about 5 or 6 eggs on the floor, and there's only a couple left. We'll have to just wait and see what happens there. But Zach Parise and Ryan Suter are James Shepard Memorials for this week. With that, we'll take a break, come back, and preview a couple games and do a very brief check-in on the Iowa Wild. Back here on Brave the Wild, segment number 2, preview segment, and of course we'll check in on the Iowa Wild as we wrap things up later. Pretty uneventful over there, unfortunately. In fact, so uneventful. Thursday, March the 3rd, tomorrow, the Wild will head to Toronto, Ontario. Well, the Wild better win this game. You better win this one with how well you've been playing the past couple of days here. Now, the Colorado Avalanche game was more of a crazy mess than it ended up being. Than the score it was a closer game than the score would indicate, is what I'm trying to say. Minnesota beat Toronto earlier in the season 1-0. Wow. I mean, only 1-0. I mean, I'm glad we won the game, but geez, what the hell was that? I mean, you think the Wild could score more goals against Toronto? who's not been very good this season. Bernier was not even in net in that game, if I remember correctly. That was a big frustration. Bernier ultimately not having a good season at all. 7-16 on the year, though of course it's the players in front of him, not just his fault. Goals against average 3.12, save percentage only 89.8, and 2 shutouts on the year. Very big struggle for Bernier, who'd been pretty damn good over the course of time with the LA Kings, one of the better backups in the league, but over in Toronto, not so much. Goals against average almost, it's been hovering around the 3 pretty much, about around 3 goals a game pretty much since he got there, but again, not a very good mix right now with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're 20, 30, and 10 on the season. A big struggle. Morgan Rielly, I was like, another Rielly on the Toronto Maple Leafs. He has 27 points on the season. One of the better defensemen on that team, I got to say. Still pretty damn young, too, as well. Born in 1994. Got his whole career ahead of him. So they have some hope there, obviously. They traded away Dion Phaneuf, and that's probably why, when you have a guy like Rielly developing and such. Overall, nothing major special going on with this club, and the Wild really should win the game. I mean, they should. Sparks is the other goaltender, by the way. Garrett Sparks, and he was in net that night, and the Wild struggled against him. His goals against average is 2.48 with 1 shutout on the year. He's only 3-2 on the season. Pretty strong save percentage, almost 92. I don't know. It would be just our luck that they put Sparks in there, who's been a spark for Toronto, I suppose, if anything, despite the fact they are riding in last place, 6 points behind the Buffalo Sabres in the Atlantic Division. Things not going well for Toronto during the course of the season, and it's no huge surprise to anybody, I would have to say, even though Mike Babcock is the coach. Good for him, I suppose. He got a big amount of money, and they're trying, but of course they're rebuilding now after making the playoffs not even that long ago, which could drive people absolutely bleeping insane at this stage. Leading scorer for the Toronto Maple Leafs is Leo Komarov right now with only 35 points. So they're worse than we are. They don't score goals and they give up a lot. So not a good situation for the Maple Leafs. Even Phaneuf wasn't having that good a season. 24 points in 51 games over the course of the season. I can imagine he was a pretty unhappy camper in that locker room, and he was traded on the trade deadline on Monday, a couple of days ago. Toronto, no excuse for the Wild to lose that game. They've got to be about the worst team in the league right now. Don't be surprised, though. Obviously, it'll be nice. They're going to probably wind up with a top pick in the draft the way things are going. And, boy, that'll hopefully catapult that team for their sake. That city is awfully frustrated. It's the popularity of the Toronto Maple Leafs in that town is unbelievable. I can imagine how they're been seething over the course of time. Minnesota heads to Buffalo. I got to think this one's going to be quite different. The Wild ultimately will beat Toronto, by the way, by a final score of 4-1. I'm going to go with a 4-1 game. That's pretty wide margin. And the Wild have been scoring goals lately, and that Toronto team, if they get 3 goals in that game, I'm going to be very upset. Very. Saturday, March the 5th, Minnesota heads to Buffalo land. Wild should have a nice little 2-game road trip here, I would hope. I would hope the Wild can pick things up and defeat this Buffalo team, even though they have all of our draft picks. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention that a 6th-round pick was included in the Nicholas Backstrom trade headed to Calgary. So another draft pick given up by the Wild. Big struggle for them right now. They're really in trouble when it comes to giving up a lot of draft picks over the course of time. That's another thing that I was thinking. Mr. Fletcher could be in trouble giving up draft pick after draft pick over the course of time. He gave away 2 first-round picks in the Matt Molson trade with Buffalo. Just think of 2 second-round picks, pardon me. Yeah, well, you got Cody McCormick to go along with that, and you gave up Mitchell as well. But my goodness, Torrey Mitchell was his name. You got Cody McCormick too, though. Yeah. Great, and you just let him go in free agency. He was a decent fourth-line center, but a fourth-line center, you gave up 2 second-round picks to the Buffalo Sabres for Molson and McCormick. You gave up another second-round pick last year for Chris Stewart. You gave up a first-rounder and other things. I believe a second-rounder as well for Pominville. You gave up a lot for him, too, for Pominville years before. Pominville was a decent player for a while there, but you gave up a lot to get him. I mean, he was pretty expensive. So, yeah, lots of draft picks thrown away by Chuck Fletcher. That's another reason why the cupboards are bare. And that's what happened with Doug Risebrough during the course of time with the with the Wild in years past, the early days of Brave the Wild, when I ranted on and on about Doug Risebrough and how little he's done for the franchise over the course of several bleeping years. Ryan O'Reilly leading the way with the Buffalo Sabres with 49 points in 59 games. Very strong season for him. A good up-and-comer for that club. At least he's fairly up-and-comer. He was a second-round pick ultimately by the Avalanche in 2009. He's been around a while, but boy, he's really developed over the course of time. He's had a solid career with Colorado and such, but really, really thriving with Buffalo right now. More freedom, and he's on the top line, and he's the main guy, all that. After that, there's a pretty dramatic drop-off behind Jack Eichel, who had 41 points on the year. Then you go down to 35. Sam Reinhart with 29, and such. So it's a quick drop-off. Ryan O'Reilly far and away the leading scorer and the leader of that team right now. Chad Johnson having a much stronger season with the Buffalo Sabres. There's another guy who was a backup with the he was a backup with the New York Islanders in the past, but ultimately much stronger season, leading the way with Buffalo right now. Goals against average, save percentage, all that good stuff. He's had a strong overall season. 2.5 goals against average, save percentage almost 92. Only one shutout on the year, so he's been fairly consistent. Even though Buffalo's still not very good, they've been a lot better than they were last year. Ultimately, the Wild, remember, not that long ago, on January 12th, played the Buffalo Sabres. This is the infamous Adam Oates game and such. Ultimately, I'm trying to remember who was in net that night. Because I don't think it was Chad Johnson. I'm pretty sure it wasn't, and it was not. Yep, that's who it was. I thought it was Allmark. He was stopping everything, and it drove me crazy. The Wild could not get anything past it, even though they made a nice, valiant comeback. They couldn't finish the job. Terrible disappointment for all of us here in St. Paul and Minneapolis and all that. Unbelievable frustration there. Yep, it was Allmark. I remember the name pretty well, and that's who I thought it was. I didn't want to just say it, though. Ultimately, the Wild should beat this Buffalo team, though. I think there's going to be a little revenge factor here. You got to be able to beat this team, even though they can. A couple of guys can score on that team, and their goaltending is better than it's been in the past and such. It's funny how both Johan Larsson and Matt Hackett haven't done jack bleep for them, though. So that's the good part. That doesn't make us look as bad as it did at the time. Oh man. Yeah, the whole Matt Hackett and Johan Larsson trade. Remember that? That was another part of getting Mr. Pominville. It was a pretty big trade. A lot going on there, ultimately, for the Wild. And on that whole Pominville trade deal, you figure you got to give up one of your young guys to get Pominville and such. So we got so many young talent, and then so many young talented guys, and ultimately the Wild came out okay in that one. Thank God for that. Then we'll wrap things up with the previews. Hosting the St. Louis Blues March the 6th. This is a huge game for the Wild. The Blues, the Blackhawks, and the Dallas Stars all tied with 83 points, leading the way in the Central Division. It is a complete logjam right now in the Central Division. 83, 83, 83. Crazy. And in fact, they're all leading the Western Conference. You have 3 number 1 seeds in the Western Conference right now. Anaheim, though, by the way, has won 8 games in a row. They are breathing down the Kings' back. I don't know if you know down their neck, whatever the word is. I don't know how the Kings are still ahead of Anaheim at this pace. But that just shows you how crazy hockey is. When you're behind, you're behind. It's hard to catch up. But Anaheim, oh boy, watch out. I just knew it. Oh, watch them win it all this year. Just watch. Don't be surprised if the Anaheim Mighty Ducks win the Stanley Cup this year. Brian Elliott and Jake Allen in net. All the familiar names that we've gotten to know and love. And Vladimir Tarasenko, the guy you always want to bring up when you talk about the 2010 draft. The Wild had the 10th pick in the draft. Took Mikhail Granlund. St. Louis Blues had they had a little bit later pick, didn't they? A little bit later, and they got bad Vlad Tarasenko with the 16th pick in the draft. 55 points in the year. 30 goal scorer already. I like you, Mikhail Granlund. Don't worry. I mean, he's got 33 points in the season, but don't worry, Mikhail. I still like you and everything, but jeez, 30 goal guy. And he's might have went up with 40 with this season. There's time for him to wind up with 40 goals in the season. Pietrangelo, one of the better defensemen out there. Bouwmeester, Shattenkirk, all those Shattenkirk, David Backes, Berglund, all these familiar names. Schwartz, Steen, Steve Ott, fourth line. Paul Stastny is still on the roster, but he's struggled over the course of time. Ott is out on the injured reserve with a hamstring injury for quite a while. Well, we'll just wouldn't it be just like him to come back though and play? Brian Elliott is out as well. Expect to see Jake Allen in net. Don't be surprised, even though I think Elliott's played the Wild better over the court. But I don't know. Both of them have struggled against the Wild, so I may pick a victory here. Both of these goalies have struggled against the Wild over the course of time. Do I have the guts to give the Wild a 3-0 week? It'd be 5 wins in a row. As good as St. Louis is, the Wild have played them extremely well ever since late last season during the regular season when we started believing, we might actually beat this club. February 6th was when the whole tailspin was in its final days, final moments. 4-1 victory by St. Louis in St. Louis. Just an absolute ass-kicking non-factor by the Wild. And this one will be on NBC Sports Sunday night. That's pretty cool. I like that. March 6th, Sunday night. NBC Sports hosting the game in Xcel Energy Center. Very cool. Get your NBC, get your Watch NBC apps running. I believe that's what it's called. Get it running, turn it on, and it's Watch ESPN. It's NBC Live, I believe it is. Live NBC Sports or something, whatever it is. You get the idea. If you're out in a boot or you're at work or something, get that app running. Get on that Wi-Fi and let's watch this game. I'm going to pick the Wild to win the game. We tend to score goals against these guys, man. I mean, we score. We score goals against these guys. We've had a strong season. It's been kind of a back and forth, though, ultimately. It's actually tied, even though as well as the Wild have played, other than that Saturday, February 6th, literally a month apart here, March 1st, or March 6th, February 6th. It's a tied series. The Wild beat St. Louis 3-2 way back on October 10th, and on Halloween, St. Louis haunted the Wild, in overtime. Haunted the Wild in overtime with a victory. December 31st, the Wild celebrated New Year with a 3-1 victory on 31st. That's kind of funny, 3-1. And then, of course, 4-1. So I'll pick the Wild to win the game. We'll go with the final score of 3-2. 3-2 victory for the Minnesota Wild over the St. Louis Blues. I need to pick the most likely guys to score. I keep screwing myself up here. Ultimately, most likely to score against the St. Louis Blues, that's going to be Mr. Should I say his name? Okay, I'll go with Zach Parise. Yeah, Zach Parise is the most likely to score against the St. Louis Blues, even though it's probably going to be dead wrong. It'll end up being like Niederreiter or something, but I'll go with that. Toronto, the most likely guy to score against Toronto. I will go with Mr. Against Toronto, the most likely guy to score is going to be Coyle. I think he's going to keep it going. 22nd goal of the year. Most likely guy to score against Buffalo is Jason Pominville. He'll get his 12th goal of the season against his former club. Pominville's going to score again. And then against St. Louis, Zach Parise. Zach Parise will hopefully get to 20 goals here. He's been pretty quiet for a while after starting the season remarkably. It's been quite a frustrating season for Mr. Zach Parise, but he will score. He's the most likely guy to score, in my opinion, against St. Louis. So there you go, a 3-0 week for the Wild. 5 wins in a row, in my humble opinion. So let's check in on the prospects a bit here before we sign off. Whatever's left of them, right? After all the guys after all the draft picks that have been traded, right? We haven't really traded any young guys, but draft picks are gone. So right now, Alex Tuck in Boston College, before I get to Iowa, he's now at 28 points in 33 games, kicking up the pace a little bit. That's good to see. Scoring a couple points the past weekend or so, 33 games. He's already at last season's number, so he's playing a little better than last year, but not super dramatically better at this stage because it's already March, and pretty soon we're going to be getting into hockey's version of March Madness as well. Over in Iowa, like nothing. I mean, you're not seeing anything going on from any of the significant players. Grayevac was able to score another goal last week. He's now at 12 points on the season in 28 games with the Iowa Wild. That's about it, though. Sutter, of course, traded away. Olofsson hasn't scored since Torchetti left. That sucks. Karanen is obviously gone. Mitchell and I believe Zach Mitchell scored another goal in the past week, or two goals in the past week, so that's good. He's the leading scorer for that team, but he's a career minor leaguer ultimately. Steve McCulloch has been up with the Iowa Wild since moving up from the Quad City Mallards, because that's like the further down minor league affiliate for the Wild. He's actually been pretty good in only 6 games. His goals against average 2.01, very strong for the former 6th round pick of the Minnesota Wild. Not former, but yeah, he's the 6th round pick in the 2011 draft. Steve McCulloch. You never know. Could be another Kemper. You never know how Kemper kind of came up. Not bad. Maybe he's the guy that actually replaces Kemper ultimately. That's the one thing. Very, very strong. He's been very good. The Iowa Wild have been more defensive-minded since Torchetti left, it appears. The scoring has really gotten quiet over the course of time, and Olofsson hasn't netted a single point. And he was on quite a tear in Torchetti's last month or so on the job in Iowa. They miss him down there, and maybe he'll end up back there again. He'll certainly be a candidate for the Wild job when they start interviewing. But to be fair to the fan base, I agree with the local shows here in town that have been saying this. To be fair to the fan base, you got to interview more people than just Torchetti. This was Michael Russo that said that. As good as Torchetti, good a job as he's done, you gotta interview the best possible candidates. And if Torchetti goes back to Iowa, it could be a lot worse. And I'm sure he'd be okay with it. He did a hell of a job down there. They were getting a lot better. But really impressed with Steve McCulloch, the 6th-round pick. So basically, 6th-round picks kind of leading the way for the Wild. 7th-round pick in Grayevac, even though he's been pretty quiet since that injury way back at the beginning of the season. Schrader, of course, a 1st-round pick of Vancouver years ago, one of the top guys down there, but he'd been on the Minnesota Wild for a while. Jared Knight still at 7 points on the season, so he was at 6 for a while. He's at 7. You get the idea. We'll leave that alone. It is what it is. Really, the highlight guy in the minor leagues right now is McCulloch, without a doubt. Steve McCulloch, ultimately down there, pardon me. So we'll wrap things up here. I want to thank you so much for listening. For those of you that like this show, please post a positive rating on iTunes, whether you're from Canada, the United States, Australia, wherever it is. And I want to thank Vince Germano a while ago, who did post a positive review on here in the Australia section. Thank you so very much. Of course, you have to click. I have to click on the Australia section to view it. So I basically leave the United States to go there. It's kind of weird how they do that. They should just show it for everybody and have it say parentheses Australia or parentheses USA, parentheses Japan. Stuff like that. I don't know why they don't do it that way. It's kind of mean. Do we have to be so isolated? Come on, right? It's iTunes. That doesn't make any sense. Kind of silly. But with that, we will wrap things up here. Thank you again. Please do write a positive rating on iTunes or Stitcher, whichever you use. Please tell your friends about the show. Thank you very much for those of you that have been retweeting and have been sharing on Facebook. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And welcome aboard to those of you who've been signing up for the Facebook page. It is facebook.com/bravethewild.minnesota. facebook.com/bravethewild.minnesota. And, of course, for Twitter, @bravethewild. I should actually... I had some Twitters on there, a couple of tweets on there. I forgot. I better get to that really quick. I actually had a couple of tweets during the trade deadline here. Might as well get to that, because I think he must be a listener if he tweeted Brave the Wild. So I apologize. I got to give you a little bit of airtime here. Hope you didn't give up on me yet. Yeah, if you are a listener, I think he might be. I hope so. It would be great. It would be great if the thing would load too, and here it is. It is from Shane Palmquist, @Shane Palmquist on Twitter. He says, I never thought this day would come. Some NHL team was dumb enough to trade for Backstrom. There is a God. #Wild. And then he messaged me. Thank you very much, Palmer, Shane Palmquist. And he continues to say, how's it go? You got to make an omelet. You can't make an omelet without breaking some egg. Deuces. Don't let the door hit you. That's funny. Oh, because what did I respond with? I was saying, indeed, there is. I love it. I wish we didn't give up any draft picks, though, because there was a 6th-round pick. And I was saying how there were so many draft picks squandered over the last couple of years that Fletcher might be done. And it's possible, even though some of the younger guys are playing better. Maybe it's just a sugar high. We'll just have to wait and see with that one. Thank you very much to those of you that have followed and those of you that have liked the Facebook page and joined it and such. Don't be afraid to comment. Really could use that. Would be greatly appreciated. And there is a phone line. It is 209-736-7877. 209-736-7877. It is a voicemail. Do treat it as such. Mention you're calling it for Brave the Wild. And please leave your name. Tell me your name on there and where you're from and comment away. Brave the Wild, baby. Brave the Wild. Those of you out there that might be from another country that don't want to have to call that line, well, we live in the day and age of smartphones, so there are free sound recorders on each and every smartphone out there. I mean, it's easy as pie to do. Just load it up and record a audio submission for about a minute or so, and then email it to me at paladinolive@yahoo.com. paladinolive@yahoo.com. Thank you again very much. Hoping the Wild continue this streak, and I have it predicted a 3-0 record this week. Hope it's legit, and the Wild make a nice run here. Until next week, take care, everybody.